Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a new guest to the podcast, Candace MacPhie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
About myself. Okay, well...
yourself and your books. And your books. Yeah.
Myself and my books. Okay, and my books. Okay, yes, we got to get those books in there. Yes, I've just released my second book a couple of months ago. It's a 5-part series called Back in a Year. And the second book is called Life Strikes Back. And it's one continuous story about... a backpacking adventure that I took in the late 90s. And it sounds, I'm not really making it sound like super awesome, but there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened. And I traveled right around the world, so one complete circle. And it was a very interesting time to be on the road, and loads of crazy things happened, loads of crazy people that we met along the way, funny. It's a lighthearted journey that you can take and just sit back and read and laugh and take a trip from your chair. And that's what these books are about.
Wonderful. Yeah, travel. I think the travel writing side of things is one I've not really explored much myself. I mostly write fiction, fantasy, and sci-fi. Mm-hmm. But so what you're this, and when did you start writing this book? I guess because that's quite a while ago at this point. I mean, the 90s feels like a long time ago to me, anyway.
Yeah, it can almost be classified as historical nonfiction at this point. I know, it does really
now
date
I feel
everybody,
bad.
But I know you said you feel terrible about that. So I took the adventure and thought, wow, this is a crazy trip. But to be honest, I wasn't really ready or equipped to write about it right after the trip happened. I did lots of journaling. I took lots of pictures, with my 35 millimeter camera, as you did back in those times. And, but I was not ready to write it I just didn't know how either. I didn't have the competency. I didn't have the skill, or the time, to be honest. There's lots of time that goes into doing this. So I left it on the shelf for a long time, not historical long time. And then I just came home and went back to work and had a family. And then when I have 3 kids and they got a little bit older and everything started to happen so fast and the years just started to slip by and it got a little scary, actually. I got a little uncomfortable and thought, life's going by pretty quick and this isn't the way I want to live it. I'm going to work. I'm coming back. I hardly see my kids. I have a nanny. I have a gardener. It wasn't the life I wanted. I didn't have kids for someone else to raise them. So I left my job and picked up these journals and started to say, okay, I want to learn how to do this. It took me a while, to be honest. I was, my first version, I thought, oh, this is so good. I'm so excited. And then I got the feedback and thought, wow, I'm not that good. It took me a long time. And my goal was to spin up some good stories, some stories that I would be proud to put my name on and to say, you know what, this is a good book. You want to read a good book and have some fun and just sit back and it just flows. It's easy to read. It's fun to read. You can relate. You're dumped right in. You have all the feels. And it took a long time to learn how to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely preaching to the choir here. I mean, I started writing about when I was I wrote my first novel when I was 13 or 14, and it's been about 20 years since then. So and I wasn't very good for the first 15 of those at the very least. I think I keep moving the goalposts on like, when did I become decent at this? But it took me a long time to get decent at it. And that's just a matter of telling a story, whereas relating things that actually happen to you is going to involve processing. I think it's probably kind of similar in a sense, even though I don't write a lot of nonfiction or life stories from my own life. Most of my books reflect a period from my life pretty strongly. The period I was writing them usually.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of artifact to them. Yeah. And so they have that in common with your with your work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think at this point I was such a different person back then that everybody in the book has become a character to me anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's not. I don't relate to the person. Well, it was obviously me, but it was an old me, right?
Yeah,
like it was a younger me, a more naive me, a more, probably more courageous me, a more risk taker me, and all of those are reflected in there. And there's some definite points where I'm like, oh, I'm typing, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm writing this down, just because I'm embarrassed that I did those things, but I promised myself I would write the real story and to be honest and to have people take a journey, not a cleansed version or there's a few things in the books where I'm like, oh man, but it makes for an interesting story and it's real and the characters are real, and whether you're just like shaking your head, because I was too, that's okay. So yeah, to me, it's interesting because it is a non-fiction book, but to me, it's become like I write it like fiction, like it just kind of flows, like it's a story. Yeah. It's not, it's an adventure story. So it happens to happen on the road with a backpack, but it's about someone who's growing up and learning about themselves and getting over grief and dealing with situations on the road. So, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And I have read a few. There's this older travel book I remember. I think it's in Xanadu. I forget what it's called exactly. But I saw it in a used bookstore, and I thought it was fascinating. It starts off in, I forget, somewhere in the Middle East, and then involves the traveling even further east. The characters in the book, the character in the story. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that was, I think that one was fiction, but it was based on the author's travels in real life. So, and that one I think came out in like the 70s. I think it's Dalrymple. Yeah, it was the author. Some Dalrymple.
Oh, well, that
don't remember the whole ton about it.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember reading the beginning.
The main. Yeah.
No, go on.
Yeah. Well, the main. I read a few other folks' work, and I found it a little flat, and what I tried to do as much as possible when I was writing, and this is what took me so long to learn. And when you said, "Oh, when did you start? When did you?" And I said, the first feedback I got on the book was, "Oh, I like your itinerary," and I was like, "Ooh, that's the low," and it's because it was missing the personal side. It was missing the story, right? It was a series, a bunch of interesting scenes and funny things that happened, but it was a little bit like listening to watching someone go through their vacation photographs, and watching them say, "Oh, this is where I went to the beach, and this is where I did this." But what was different about this was that's, I think, why it took me so long to write it, so much time to write it, so much soak time, because there's a lot of reflection, there's a lot of growth. It's a story, it's a journey. So it's not just a physical journey, but a personal journey as well. And it's funny, it's lighthearted, it's all the good stuff. So, but it did take me a long time to learn how to write that. And like you were saying, in terms of developing the skills from going from PowerPoint presentations, which is what I used to flip up at work, to actually telling a compelling story is a completely different competency, and hours and hours and hours and spending so much time writing one sentence and trying to finesse the word and look for the right word that would give you the most impact in that sentence, or just words, and just really focusing on the least words, the most impactful words, the most impactful scenes, the most impactful moments, to make sure that the pace is good and you're not bored.
Absolutely. I think that's obviously the most important factor of most books, is to not bore the reader, right? That's kind of the job.
Yeah.
To put it in very crass, simple terms, right? If the reader is bored, you have failed as a storyteller to some extent, no matter what you're doing, as if you're telling a story. Yeah.
Oh, well, absolutely. And I think trying to sort of spin these journals, which were full of like moany, angsty sort of goings on, but interesting stories in between, and trying to sort of weed out the crap and to be able to say, okay, well, what is interesting, not to me as a person, to sort of step back and say, okay, what makes a compelling story? What is going to make this something someone's going to want to read? And that was where my work was really, trying to be able to say, okay, what is the story? What is the point of this book? Like, what are you going to get when you get to the end and you're going to go, oh, I feel satisfied. Like it was a good meal. It was a good book. I feel like I got, my time was well spent, invested into reading these words, and making sure that they were compelling and smooth. And that took so much time, like so much time. I didn't really, I'd never appreciated ever in my life. I've written communications, I've written stuff, and it has taken me time to write pages and pages, but to write a book, a comprehensive book that is compelling, that takes time. And I finally gave myself the time to learn and to do it, because learning is one thing, but doing is a whole different story.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I keep saying that word, but it's so true. In your experience, what was the hardest part to learn, or what took the longest, maybe?
I think because the story for this particular situation, first of all, I didn't have the skills to do it, and I thought I did, and that's danger number one. So I had to get over myself first. The second thing was I had to get over this block I had in terms of putting everything in, because that's just not worth it either. So, and then being able to go back to learning how to write a book was the next thing, and to say, okay, well, once I have the story arc and once I understand what the point of this book is, then it will be easier for me to fire up kind of what scenes need to be amped up, what scenes need to not be there, or perhaps, be a little bit less, or however, and then to understand how the style of the story was. So so many learnings around just the competency to write that I didn't know and I thought I did. And I think that was probably the hardest part, was that. And then once I found someone who I trusted and who I was willing to listen to, because that's another thing too, because when you get feedback, you might be like, oh yeah, whatever. But when you actually get feedback from someone you trust and someone who you respect, and then go, ooh, okay. And then you take it on, and then you apply it and you learn, and then you take on the feedback and apply it and learn. I actually found that pretty awesome, because I thought, I've been doing my corporate job for 20 years and I was pretty good at it, and I wasn't getting feedback anymore in terms of how to get better at it, because I was always really good at it. So getting feedback telling me I was terrible was actually wonderful, because I hadn't had that in a while, and it was pretty exciting to learn something completely new and that I was terrible at. And then to be able to take that feedback on and reapply it, go back, get the feedback again, reapply it again. It was just such an iterative process. And how many times I ended up rewriting pages, rewriting the book over and over, listening to the book, reading the book, rewriting the book. I didn't think that was possible. There was never in my mind did I ever think you would have to rewrite a book that many times. But I figure, I don't know if it was just me or if it was just because I was learning, but in my head, I'd always had this romantic notion, like you would sit wonderfully at your desk and type away, and this magic would come out, and, you would spend a bit of time on grammar, and then you would have this wonderful piece of work, and it's just not what happened. So, it was blood, sweat, tears, frustration, waking up in the middle of the night, sending myself an email going, okay, rewrite this scene like this. And it was a lot of time and a lot of effort. But my goal was to produce something that I would be happy having my name on, and that I would be proud to say, this is my book. So I put up with it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I've heard many. I mean, this is over 300 episodes of this podcast. I've talked to a lot of authors now, and I think the number one thing I've heard is that you don't, and it's been my experience as well, of course, is that nobody starts off with the skills to write a book. Writing the book is the only way to get the skills, and rewriting it is the only way to make sure that things actually work. I mean, so even though, I mean, it's funny because when you say, you think it's just going to be sitting at your desk and then it flows and there's just like a little bit of a cleanup and then you're done. And that wasn't how it worked, but it's kind of how I do things now, but I have written 40 books. So, of course, it's a little different when you have that much muscle memory and experience for how stories go together. I mean, it took me a lot of effort, as the Buddhist nun Tenzin Jitsun Palmo said, it takes a lot of effort to become effortless. It takes a great deal of effort, in fact. And I'm not saying I'm effortless. I'm not effortless. That's how much effort it takes to become effortless. Is I haven't done enough yet, and I've done quite a bit. So the journey continues for most of us, at least.
Yes. Well, yeah. Yeah. And I love that about writing. I actually get pretty excited about the concept of how you can get better, stronger, faster, and I get pretty excited about a good sentence, a good paragraph, something that's different from the rest that will keep the reader enchanted and keep them going. And I like that. I get a buzz off that, and I think you have to, because writing is such a solitary job, and you have to keep motivated and say, okay, I'm getting to this page today and I'm getting to this scene today, and keep pushing yourself to reach your goals to get it done, because it's
celebrate every step. I've heard that also.
Having to celebrate the small wins if it's
in there with what the other stuff you said as well.
Together, you got a really good idea.
Really like that advice, and also taking your time on a piece of work, especially earlier work, but at any time. Rushing a piece of writing, in my experience, and I wonder how you feel about this. I find that if I rush a piece of writing, people will say you can't tell. There's a strain of creators that say that, and it's possible to take your time in a hurry, right? You can go pretty fast. You can write a story very quickly, but you don't have to rush the story. But if you do rush the story and you cut parts that you need and stuff like that, you refuse to give it the time it needs to grow. I find that, and however much time that is,
you can tell,
that can be the real death to a piece for me. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, also if you're grooving with the story, and I find this, if I read a book and I get a little cross with the author if they haven't, if this is so good, and then you could tell it was a section that's a bit rougher, maybe they didn't spend as much time reviewing it or editing it, and then it picks up again later. I just go, come on, I know it's more work and it's more hours. It's way more hours. The hours and hours you spend making sure, whatever your reviewing process is. Mm-hmm. But as an author, I think it's your responsibility. Well, I guess if that's your goal, if you don't mind, then fair enough. But for me, my goal is to put out something. I would just be so cross if I spent all that time on something, and if I miss something, then fair enough. Okay, fair. But if I haven't put absolutely everything into that, and to review and to make sure all the threads that are going through the story have all closed off, or they each ramp up and ramp down at the right and close off, and I haven't left you hanging on any or dangling on or wondering, oh, what happened to this person, or where did that go, or wait, weren't you over here? And that's your accountability as the author, to be able to to weave that, close that off, or even if it's just a couple of words and then we were done, or but just to be able to do that. I guess I enjoyed that part of it a lot, and I constantly question myself, okay, have I done enough there? Have I done enough on that part? Have I done enough on this part to be able to fulfill the reader? Because I don't know, I get mad. I'm like, well, didn't you have a sword in your hand? Where did that sword go? Or whatever the scene was, and then you're like, okay, I can't, I or if they're wearing different clothes, or I have a pair of jeans on, and then I wipe my hand on my skirt. I'm like, you had jeans on. Like I get very frustrated with that. I just I don't know. Just and I think anything that stops the flow of the reader's enjoyment has to be eliminated, and that takes so much time, right? That takes so much time to edit out, and just awareness, and I feel personally that I've rewritten these books so many times that I'm like, I often wonder, have I wasted time? Like, was there a more efficient way to do that? And maybe, but did I learn a whole lot while I was doing it?
1 second.
Yes. Was it terribly frustrating and terribly disheartening at times when I'd go back and review a part, and I thought, oh, this part's really good, and then I'd review it and go, okay, I need to fix it, or just however it was. But and I feel more confident with my skill now, and I feel that if I was to, my goal was always to write these books and to start to cut my teeth, if you will, in terms of a writer, to be able to start with this and then see what kind of books I would write after. But I wanted to learn how to do this first. And I also didn't want because it's one continuous story, I didn't want the reader to be disappointed that the first book, maybe from a written perspective, wasn't as good as the last book. I didn't want the last book to be so well written and the first book to be, it's okay. So I took so much time before I published them, because I didn't want to spin up something, or sometimes an author might spin up a series. I've had authors where I really like their latest series and I'll read it, and then I'll go read their previous work, and then I'm like, oh, okay, they definitely learned along the way.
Oh yeah, that would be ultra challenging. That'd be very challenging, especially because this is your
develop
first
their
book.
skills as a writer. And
that's a very ambitious goal.
A little disappointed
probably more
in
than
their first
you knew,
work, but still enjoy it anyway. But I didn't want that. I wanted the first book to be just as good as the other ones, which is why I think it just took me so long. I spent probably 4 years. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. And I think it was a challenge for my family, too, because my husband kept looking at me and he was supporting my writing journey through the whole time. But it was years and years before I published my first book. And he kept looking at me and he kept reading over my shoulder. And I'm like, stop reading over my shoulder. I'm not ready for you to look at that part. I'm still figuring it out. And going to work and coming home and having a paycheck, people understand. It's tangible. But to have this crazy lady sitting at her computer for hours and weeks and days and months and years and just not having anything back for it was a bit of a faith leap for the family as well, just to sort of support me to get to that goal. So it was a little more challenging from that perspective, I think.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it makes sense that for people who don't write or tell stories or do creative work, I guess, in general, because everyone's creative is my belief, but not everybody does creative work the way a writer or an artist does. but it can be challenging, especially when you can't tell what's working. They can't see the work you're doing. They can't say that's a beautiful painting that just kind of appeared. So it becomes more challenging even with writing, because you can't see the result until it's very much later in the process. You can't see. I mean, for a lot of people, especially fiction authors, you're not going to see the first novel. That may never be shown to anybody, for example. Or for, I mean, or the story is going to develop so much that it'll be unrecognizable by the time it hits the shelves or the web.
Yes, and I would say, the first versions of what I put up and the last versions, I mean, they're an echo of each other. They're not anywhere different, anywhere the same in terms of the caliber of the writing. It was basically, the first versions was basically retyping out my journal versus the last versions, which was a compelling story that has 5 different storylines, but they're all connected, and it's one journey of this person who's traveling around the world doing some crazy stuff and seeing some crazy things, and you can just enjoy it, and all the insecurities are there and all of the crazy things, so you kind of get right beneath the surface in that, and the balance of that as the skill to be able to, because the thing about the books I write is that you're constantly moving, right? So you're constantly in a new place, you're constantly in a new city, in a new room, everywhere. So my balance was really trying not to, this isn't a travel guide, so I'm not describing every single site that we see, but most of the times I don't even talk about the sites. I'll say we went to somewhere, but it's more about the places we stay, the people we meet. But you still, as a reader, need to understand where you are, to be hot, to be cold, to be sticky, to be smelly, to be uncomfortable, whatever it is. So and that's why it blew out to 5 books, because originally I had said, okay, so I'm going to write a book, and then my goal was for folks, my goal was 2 goals. I told you the first goal, something good I was proud to put my name on. Second was I wanted people to take the journey. So in order to take the journey, I needed more words. So that's where it blew out to 5, because I didn't have enough to be able to dump you in a place, tell you about the feelings, tell you about what happened, and then keep moving and have the reader experience what it's like to live life out of a backpack on trains and dusty bus stations, and seeing wonderful things and meeting wonderful people, and then having terrible experiences, having all of the ups and downs. I needed more words and more space. So that's why they kind of
that's also a very substantial series right there. How long is each book, would you say, in word count?
Each book in word counts about.
Wow, you really are telling an epic story. I mean, I wasn't expecting necessarily to have that many, but you really do need all 5 if you're gonna. Yeah, you need all that space. That's intense.
And that's why I got excited when I learned more about words and being able to get rid of the sort of clunky words, and to be able to, just read through faster, to be able to get rid of different words and use one word instead of 3. I get very excited when that happens, so that it just makes it shorter and faster. They're all under just 400 pages printed. And so it's definitely a journey. And I didn't know, I didn't know what I didn't know when I started, and I didn't know what I was getting into in terms of writing, basically 5 theses about, the equivalent. But it's been so awesome, and I'm very lucky to be able to say, okay, this is it. This is the start, and then to see what I want to do next. But I am absolutely loving writing these, and I've gotten, like I said, I think the ultimate transition for me is that all the characters in the book have become characters for me, and they all have their personalities and their growth paths. And whether it's me or some people I was very close to, so much time has passed that I'm able to step back and just write these as characters and people, but staying true to what happened. So it makes it kind of fun. Yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy it. I did not realize how much I would enjoy working on my own. I've always been someone who had teams and worked with lots of people and produced work together. I didn't realize how much I would enjoy working on my own, which was also something interesting to learn. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been kind of a lone worker. I do my own work. I like that. But, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny one, you know. I can kind of get lost in it, and the time just slips by, but I don't hate it. Like, I don't think, oh, what a waste of time. I did 4 pages and it took me all day, but I think, wow, that's 4 awesome pages. Like, tick.
So do you still
excited about that? It's my nerdy side.
Yeah. Do you still have kind of that? No matter how long it takes, get this scene right. Is that kind of your attitude toward producing the actual text, the story?
Absolutely. I will work to the best I can. Like, what I figure is, if I've done the best thing I can and I leave a scene as best I can and then move on to the next one, I know it's not the end because I will read it all over together. But I know there's times where you're just, we used to say, oh, here's your explicit. When I did an MBA in Glasgow, and had the privilege of working with folks from all over the world, and towards this degree. And one guy used to say, well, it's like polishing turds. Like, it gets to a point where you've gone, you just like, it's good enough, And I felt with transient work, if you're spinning up a presentation or a paper for school, like, you need to get the best grade, the professor's going to read it. But what I try to do is to say, okay, I'm going to push as hard as I can on this scene, but I know it's not the end, because it will have reviews when I go through the whole thing, to make sure it's good. And I don't know about you, but I find I skip words when I read, like, myself. So when I read my work again, I can't just sort of sit there and read it, because then I know I'll skip words and then I won't do as good a job as I can. But one time I was sitting at my computer and I have this cat who's, he's not super lovey, but if he needs love, he needs it like right now. So he jumped on my keyboard and the book started reading itself to me. And I went, oh, isn't this interesting? So thanks to my cat Romeo, now I listen aloud. So I'll write it, I'll print it, and then I also listen to it. And I'll listen to it from start to finish. And I'm constantly pausing and then fixing a word, going back again, listening to it again. So
I've done the same thing.
That listen through is very valuable to me, because that's where you can really, when someone's, even though it's a little computerized, and I'm sure there's a better program than Word, but that's sort of my yeah. And I just find you can really see this sort of rougher patches, or where it's not as smooth, or where maybe there's a page or two where maybe you're having an off day when you first wrote it, that really stick out. You need to spend a bit more time on those to make sure that the reader doesn't go, oh man,
yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if you heard this, but I have tried to write I do listen to the computer read me my work now, and it's as part of the editing process. So I totally understand what you're saying. I think more people should try that, because hearing the book out loud, it catches so much stuff. It changes your perspective on it, which is very, very important.
It changes. Yeah. Absolutely. And so my order tends to be that I'll write the scenes and then I'll read it over a few times on the screen and then I listen to it all. And it's not a straight shot. Like I couldn't sort of download it and listen to it on my iPad, like while I go for a walk. Like I sit there, pause, go back, change a word, listen to it again, listen to it again. Okay, that's good. Go on to the next, it takes a long time to do that listen through. And then I print it off because then when you print it off, you notice those, I've used that word 2 pages ago, or, it becomes a lot. So, reviewing your book in all the mediums that your readers read them, I think is important too, because just from my perspective, I'm much better picking up on the read once I hear it and then seeing it printed on paper. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Go on.
Oh, I lost you.
Oh, okay. So we're having a little difficulty here, but it's okay.
I never realized how much I missed. Yeah. Okay.
How what? Oh, can you hear me now? Sorry,
I just lost you again.
This has been a tough recording session, folks. Okay, great.
Yes, I can.
So, as much as the editing goes is difficult, I want to spend toward the end of this. We're getting toward the end of the show, and I wanted to ask you, because it sounds like you've read some fiction or storytelling media. We all watch TV and movies for the most part, but what kind of books do you enjoy reading, I guess?
Oh, I love romance novels. Just pour through those. I have just no shame in all of the romance novels that I read.
It's enjoying things should never bring people shame, if it doesn't hurt anybody. Come on. But especially books, yeah.
No, doesn't hurt anybody, and I love it. I love it. I get so much joy out of it, and I could pass the day away reading an interesting romance novel. So
have you been?
I love it.
Oh, I mostly read this sort of stuff.
How about you?
So
what do you like to read?
Mostly fantasy, but I did just finish a book recently that I have brought up on the show a couple times. American Psycho. I just finished reading it yesterday. And this is a literary horror novel that is really, really weird. Most people probably heard of it or seen the movie with Christian Bale. But it's an interesting book because it's almost all hallucinatory, right? Like, you don't know. It's hard to tell how much of it actually happened. But I do come down on the side of the book, like how much actually happened in the context of the story world, right? I come down on the side of very little of what this guy imagines is actually true, because there's so much of it is insane.
Yeah.
That the protagonist would get away with certain crimes that I wouldn't be able to believe that this guy, no matter how rich he is able to get in a gunfight with police officers and then escape and be fine and just be shooting the shit with his corporate nerd friends, 5 pages later, and we never really have to cover how he got away. That doesn't make any sense to me. But it does make sense if he's psychotic, which he definitely is. He has this psychosis, so he's imagining this world that is simultaneously out to get him and also his oyster. And it's an interesting book. Not sure if I would recommend it unless people are into literature, literary fiction, because it is difficult to read. And I found it extremely difficult to read because it's quite unpleasant, especially the first 100 pages. So, but I did end up liking the book quite a bit. It's one of those books that my enjoyment level was still probably a 3 out of 5, if I were to rate it. But I do think the book is an interesting book, and so my interest level was maybe a 4 or 5 out of 5.
Right.
So there's some good, there's some bad in there for me.
Oh.
Yeah, though we'll see if it sticks with how long it'll stick with me, because I did just finish reading it yesterday as we record this, so maybe I will forget things about it.
Okay.
But I read half the book this week, so maybe that's the main reason I really remember it right now. Of the books I've read this year, I still much prefer something like Slaughterhouse-Five.
So there's something about it.
that book, Slaughterhouse-Five, I can recommend to pretty much anybody. I think that it's a fantastic novel, and it's a lot easier to read.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. You should.
Okay. Okay. Well, I always like to. Okay. Okay. Well, I always like to wow my dad with good book recommendations, so I'll have to take that one
Okay.
on. I read The Woman by Kristen Hanna.
Great.
So I
And no need for any
absolutely
spoilers. I mean,
loved that
frankly,
book.
a book
That
report
was
isn't
so good.
what this show is
And I
about.
think even
As
if
much
you're
as
not into,
I can ramble myself.
if you're into
It's
fantasy,
great. Thank you so
it
much,
was
Candace, for
just
being on the show.
so well
Where can
written
people find
and
your work?
such an enjoyable read.
Yeah.
So the content was fantastic. So I would completely recommend that one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be the name of the episode.
Well, thank you. Well, you can find my work on Amazon and actually on there's links
Wonderful.
to everything
Thank you
on
so
my
much.
website.
As for this
well,
podcast, you can find more episodes on my Libsyn feed or at my website, timneedawriter.com.
Link to it.
That's
and
the words Tim needs or need a writer.
So
probably
that's just where you find me, and then there's links to all the books, and then there's pictures.
timneedawriter.com
spells
it's said like my name, but it's pronounced like the words, like a sentence. So. And it's spelled like that too. So anyway, thank you for listening, everybody. You can find my latest books all on Amazon. The Demon Hunter series is getting has a new cover. It should be on sale soon. I forget when I scheduled that, but I'll be back with you before then, probably. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a good week. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.